The call of the Hogs can be heard all the way to San Francisco.
You're listening to Pod at the Palace with Curtis Wilkerson on Inside Arkansas.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome into the show. It's game day again. We got a bubble buster game, Bud Walton Arena tonight between Arkansas and Texas, 8 p.m., of course, on ESPN2. No need to really bury the lead here. It's just never easy for the Razorbacks, is it? The biggest storyline heading into this game was the status of Adou Thiero. Left the game early against Missouri. John Calipari had some interesting comments about him on the radio show. Well, there's no drama here. Adou Thiero has been ruled out for this game. So nothing makes sense, really. I mean, he left with about 6 minutes left against Missouri. I thought he landed awkward on his right leg, but the athletic trainer was looking at his left leg, his knee, the back of his leg, around the top of his calf, his hamstring. And then, he's back on the bench celebrating with the team in the end. And, and then Coach Cal after the game says that it was his back bothering him. Maybe his back is bothering him, but that's not the concern here, at least not the primary one. So Monday on the radio show, Cal was kind of dropping the hints in there that they're preparing to not have him for at least this game. Tuesday morning, Chuck Martin was the press conference interview. He was asked a couple different times about Adou, didn't even attempt to answer, just said they're taking it day by day, and then waited to see what the availability report looked like, and he's out of there for this game against Texas. So as of this recording, Tuesday night, I do not know what his exact injury is. Like I said, saw the medical staff checking, some of the ligaments supporting the knee. Also saw him, look like they might have been doing some work on his lower hamstring, upper calf area. It's just kind of hard to say. So if this is a game or two situation, listen, things become increasingly more difficult here, but maybe you can find a way to manage. If it's a long-term deal, I'm not sure what the ceiling is for this group without their, two best pro prospects, their two top scorers, their top rebounder, their most versatile defender out and only having a 7-man rotation to work with. I don't anticipate that John Calipari is going to extend beyond those 7 guys. I really don't. But he might be in a situation where he has to. You never know with foul trouble and anything else. If he does extend beyond the regulars, I would imagine that the crack glass in case of emergency player would be Jaden Carletwa, 6'5" freshman guard. He's the guy who consistently gets to warm up with the regulars and has been the most healthy because those guys have been banged up too. So I would imagine it would be him that would get a look, in a pinch. I remember a couple years ago that Kate Arbogast would, he'd get like a minute at the end of a half or just randomly make an appearance here and there. So if it's a situation where you just really don't want to pick up a second foul late in the first half or something, maybe you see him, for a spot minute here or there. I really wouldn't anticipate it too much. It's a tough blow for the Razorbacks. It just seems like every time they take a step forward, they're almost forced to take a step back and reevaluate. Every time you think they've turned a corner or found a formula that works, that they get hit with something else. It's unfortunate. It sucks. It doesn't feel fair. It irritates you even more about Cal's decision to only recruit 9 players that he's comfortable putting in a basketball game. The next man up and battle through adversity, rah-rah speeches. Those are all great. It just doesn't change reality. Arkansas is in a really tough spot here. They become less efficient on both ends of the floor without Thiero. He is the most important player on this roster. And, it's one of those deals that's going to require a group effort to replace him. So I would anticipate that Trevin Brazile is going to start in his place, whether you like it or not. It's the only thing that makes sense. You could start Billy or whatever, but then you don't have a single guard that you could rotate in. If you start TB in there at the 4, his more natural position, then you've got one guard in Billy that you can rotate in and one big in Jonas. So there you go. And honestly, it needs to be Brazile. On one hand, this is a guy who's started and been productive in this league for multiple years. He's had some big games and big moments this season. On the other hand, he's been essentially unplayable here in recent weeks, the last several games. You need a complete 180 from TB in a hurry. With someone's misfortune comes another person's opportunity. And it's really on him, quite honestly. He's going to have to be good for Arkansas to get this done. I would imagine you're going to see a little bit of Big Z and Jonas Adou together out there on the floor. We did see that for just a minute or two against Missouri the other day. And, it's okay in there. I think there are times where they can make it work. They could be strategic with it where, when Texas has Shedrick and maybe Kaluma not on the floor, but they have, what's that guy's name? Kent, the non-shooter at the 4 that's in there. If they have those two guys together, maybe you could get away with it for a stretch. So just monitoring the substitution patterns and doing that. And you're also going to see some Billy Richmond, 4-guard lineups with him, Carter, DJ, and Nelly mixed in there. They're going to have to mix and match it to get through those, to get through 40 minutes. So it is not ideal by any means, but the show must go on. Like I promise you, Texas does not feel sorry for the Razorbacks. And the stakes don't change here, no matter who does or does not play, who is or who isn't available. It's huge. And what you have is 2 teams here pretty much, both projected into the NCAA tournament field right now. In most cases, you see Arkansas in that last 4 in category, Texas maybe a little bit higher, the last 4 buys just a notch ahead. There you go. We all remember the Razorbacks going down to Austin and getting a big win over Texas a couple weeks ago. Completing the series sweep would be massive for Arkansas if they can find a way to do it on their home floor in a wide-out game. The challenge just got infinitely more complicated, but they need to get it done. This is an important one for Arkansas, and let me show you why. If you take a look at this graphic, look at how close these 2 teams are to one another in terms of resume. It's uncanny. It really is. The same exact record, same exact conference record, within one of each other in the net rankings, within one of each other at Torvik. It's just, you go on and on and on down the list here, and they are almost identical. It's crazy. I didn't think it was that close, but it really is. And honestly, if the Hogs find a way to win this game tonight, sweep the head-to-head, pick up a game in the SEC standings, and add another solid victory to the resume, I just don't really see how it's possible for these 2 teams not to immediately flip spots in the pecking order. Arkansas gets that breathing room then in the last 4 buys. And what that means is you're still on the bubble, but you're in solid enough position to where you're not necessarily in that Dayton range, right? That first 4 range. So a little slither of breathing room. We all remember the last meeting. Like it was blowout city for Arkansas. They got up over 20, didn't they? If they didn't get up by more than 20, they were close to it. And then it turned into the ref show in the second half. You could tell right away how that second half was going to go with all the whistles. And that changed the momentum and the trajectory of the game. It got dicey there at the end. Arkansas wound up taking care of business. I think Texas got maybe as close as 5 or 6 or something, but the Razorbacks were able to overcome that. It felt like 8-on-5 for a stretch there in the second half. But they look like clearly the better team out there. Nelly Davis lit him up. He had more than 20 in that game. I think he hit 4 threes. Big Z, he didn't score a ton. I think he only had 9 points, but he had a dozen rebounds, which is really good to see. Trey Johnson, the star guard for Texas, he wound up with 24, but he was really inefficient. It's like 6 of 22 or something from the field. Arkansas held Tremont Marks scoreless, who was kind of their winning X factor. I agree with what Chuck Martin said in the preview about how, like Trey Johnson's, he's the kind of that guy. Like he's going to wind up getting his, whether he's efficient or not. But when Texas wins, they usually have another guy who steps up and plays really well. And a lot of times it's Tremont Mark. Like when him and Trey Johnson are both playing well, that's a super, super dynamic backcourt. Honestly, if you remember, or if you went back and listened to the last preview we did before the Texas game in Austin, I was kind of talking about key matchups, and I listed it at the 4 position between Thiero and Arthur Kaluma, right? Interestingly enough, and maybe, I don't know if this could make you feel a little bit better about not having Adou in this game. He was sick when they went and played Texas, and he also fouled out and only played 21 minutes. Now, he did some good things in there. It was one of those weird nights where he was 6 of 12 or something from the free throw line again. But he was kind of a tough cover for him, but he only played half the game. and he did foul out, and so he was limited from that standpoint. Meanwhile, and he didn't do much statistically in this game, but I remember coming away impressed with the job that Trevin Brazil did defensively on Kaluma. I thought his length really, it really bothered him in there, and Arkansas is going to need that again. It's also worth noting that Kaluma has been banged up too. He was not listed on the injury availability report from the SEC. Chendall Weaver, a guard for them who was out the first time these teams played, he's out again. Kaluma missed a game. He played about 20 minutes in that game at South Carolina. He's fully available for this one, but not sure if he's really quite 100%. I guess we're going to find out soon enough here. But it's weird. Momentum's a crazy thing because before this news with Thiero, and that's a blow, man. It really is. But it felt like these teams were kind of heading in an opposite direction. Although again, now like Texas is probably smelling blood in the water, right? But both have their backs against the wall, and they should theoretically be playing with max desperation and urgency and all that. A win for either team here would be huge. But Arkansas, I feel like, has been doing that with the urgency thing. They finally got over the hump against Missouri, and boy, they earned it. Texas, meanwhile, like I know they got that win at home over like Kentucky's guardless roster, and good on them for getting that done. But they just haven't, they haven't been that impressive. And then they went and got their asses kicked at South Carolina, and so it made you wonder what their mindset would be. Remember after the Auburn game going into Missouri, I was like, like they played well, but this could go one of two ways. Either you're deflated because of another close loss, and it's just like, man, we just can't catch a freaking break here, and you have a letdown, or you're just extra motivated. And it's kind of that refuse to lose mantra that Coach Cal was putting out there, and that's what Arkansas had. With Texas, it's like, you just kind of been slipping and inconsistent, and then you go get punked by the team that hasn't won a game in the league. Like, does that motivate you? And all of a sudden you come out and play like your hair's on fire at Bud Walton Arena? Or does that get in your head and impact your confidence a little bit? We'll find out. I mean, I think it's something to keep an eye on. A few keys here for Arkansas, and then we'll wrap up. I mean, you got to replace Thiero here, and it really can't be one guy that does it. You got to get a little bit from everyone, right? Like, can everybody in the rotation get you one extra bucket, one extra rebound? Can you overcome it in that way? A little bit more from everyone, but a lot more from Trevin. Listen, when we were doing the pre-games on the Pot of That Nature for football, Andrew and I, we'd always like dish out challenges to certain players. We felt like, it was an important matchup, or, maybe they've been slipping lately or whatever. Issuing a challenge to Trevin Brazil here. Like he's got to be really good for Arkansas. It's time for him to step it up and figure it out here. It's going to be critical. Can he kind of snap the hell out of it when Arkansas needs him the most? It's a good opportunity for him to right some wrongs, right? Like to repent for some of those sins, like scoring for Auburn, for example. Big moment for Trevin. We'll see what his mental toughness, his fortitude looks like in this one. I think there's a balance to be had. On one hand, you can't let Trey Johnson beat you solo, which he's a guy who's capable of doing that. He kind of did it in a lot of ways against Kentucky. But you also can't let Batman have a Robin, like we talked about earlier. Tremont Mark, Arthur Kaluma are two guys who can really be those secondary creators and playmakers for him. And if you get Trey Johnson with his typical 20 to 25, and you have one of those guys kind of get off, that's when it becomes problematic with Texas. If you're able to contain them, they can really struggle in there. So those matchups are going to be important. Again, I don't necessarily expect Arkansas to completely shut T Mark down and hold him scoreless again. But you certainly don't want to have the flip side of that. He's had some huge games in Bud Walton. You want to get him comfortable in that mid-range going off on you, because then you could be in some trouble there. So that's going to be important. Listen, you got 7 guys, and you got to figure out a way to get through 40 minutes without a bunch of drop off there. I think it's going to be important for Arkansas maybe to just kind of shorten the game early, right? Conserve some fuel for the second half. You're going to have to grind it out. I think pace is going to be really, really critical in the first half of this game. And, you might have to be a little bit more timely about transition and how hard you're pushing and everything like that. Strategic about taking some timeouts, right? Strategic about your subs. Maybe you get a guy a blow in the final minute or so before a media timeout. That way it kind of extends his break in real time. Little things like that, they're going to have to be really, really cognizant of. And then whatever you do not get in foul trouble early in the game. Just can't happen. Arkansas cannot be in a situation where Billy's out there being too handsy and he's got 2 fouls right away, or your guards are getting beat, off the dribble, and then, Big Z picks up a couple right away. You can't afford it. You got to conserve those. That way you can be max effort, fully aggressive and intense and everything you need to be in the second half. It's going to be weird. It's going to be interesting to see. I think back to, a couple years ago with Muss, not the Nick Smith team, the team the year before, I guess it was 21-22, where they kind of had JD Note as their only guard, but it was basically JD, and Stanley Amude and Aldis Toney and Jalen Williams and those guys. And then you didn't really have a whole lot going on off the bench, right? Like Kamani would play a little bit. Devo was the main guy who was playing minutes for you off the bench, but then you'd have Kamani in there, and then Chris Likes, and then he was like free throw duty. So we've seen Arkansas teams navigate with 6-7 guys for the most part in there. I think what makes you uncomfortable is Arkansas always had other options that they could have turned to. You know what I mean? And now there's just such a steep drop off after that 7 that you really worry about it. So the foul trouble thing is going to be really important. You don't want Arkansas to sacrifice their intensity and the havoc and the chaos that they're able to create on that end of the floor, because that's what makes them a top 20 defense in the country. But at the same time, you're going to have to just think a little bit harder about, do I need to jump this passing lane? Do I need to go for this steal? Is it worth it for me to try this chase down block? Because that whistle count is going to be critical. I hope there's a good crowd in Bud Walton Arena. Again, it's a whiteout. It's a huge game. A little bit later on a Wednesday night, but they need it packed out and rowdy in there. Kind of that, that 6-man that, you better be 8-10 points better than Arkansas to beat them in Bud. Kind of what they need. I think it's kind of what they need in this one. I don't know how this is going to go, folks. When Boogie went down, Arkansas had a couple days to just kind of scramble and come up with a game plan. And they were really able to kind of gut one out against Georgia and just found a way to win that game somehow. And it was stinky, right? In the 60s, neither team shot well. It was a grind. And maybe it needs to be like that again. I don't know. We'll find out soon enough. And then we'll talk about it on the Pod at the Palace postgame show immediately following the game. So be on the lookout for that. And I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Arkansas so close to securing a spot here after everything they've been through. Just a couple more wins away from getting in that NCAA tournament. This is a golden opportunity. You just got to come together and grind it out, and we'll see what happens. We'll catch you guys afterwards for the post-game show. It's been Curtis Wilkerson with Inside Arkansas on the Pod at the Palace. Y'all have a good one. Enjoy the game.